All right. Good morning, Doug. Today, we want to talk about some news that happened overnight was the assassination of the president in Haiti. Now, we've talked about Haiti on this podcast a few times because of your experiences there and just thoughts on the country itself. But when you heard the news that he'd been assassinated, what did you think?
Well, I'd say that type of thing is inevitable in a country like Haiti. When I was down there the last time, and how long ago was that? Was it 3 years ago, 4 years ago? I don't know, something like that. I can check my passport. I went to the presidential palace, uh, didn't meet with Moise, just with some of his subalterns, uh, pitching my plan to radically reform the country. Because if people didn't listen to what we said about Haiti in the past, let me just kind of recap this, because I doubt very many people listening, or very many Americans at all, have been to Haiti. But a few salient facts about it that are interesting. As far as I'm concerned, it is absolutely the bottom of the barrel from absolutely every point of view. Not just, they say it's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Well, that's an easy call. I think it's the poorest country in the world, quite frankly, and the most dysfunctional and generally just screwed up. Very odd in that just across the border between, it shares the island of Hispaniola with the Dominican Republic. And when you fly over that between the two countries, it's noticeable. Haiti is desolate, deforested. It looks like a semi-desert, and the DR is a verdant rainforest. I mean, it's just the way these places are managed. And the people in the DR, Haitians, are always trying to, it says that the Dominican Republic has closed the border to Haiti because of the chaos. But it's always been closed. I mean, Haitians desperately try to get into the Dominican Republic, just like they desperately try to get in everywhere. Like in the Bahamas, there are scores of thousands, 100,000, well, nobody knows, Haitians in the Bahamas. They've kind of taken over some islands. And once they're there with their own culture and their own problems and their own language, they're not going home. And why should they? If I was a Haitian, I just want to get the hell out of that place. And I say it not because I dislike Haiti. I first went to Haiti in 1971, and it was a delightful place. Papa Doc was running it. And it was, I could stay in a hotel, and I did stay in a hotel in downtown Port-au-Prince, which is absolutely out of the question today. Country only had 3 million people back then.
Now it's 12, right?
12, not counting, I guess, but nobody really knows these things. I mean, these are all guesstimates, not counting 1 million in the US and 1 million scattered around the Caribbean and so forth. Who really knows? But it was a delightful place. And it was cheap and really safe. Well, maybe that was because of the Tonton Macoute. And you could always recognize them. They always wore dark sunglasses standing around. And the one thing that a Haitian wouldn't dream of doing was touching a tourist. If you did, you wouldn't live very long to start with, but while you were alive, you'd regret it. So, they kept a lid on the place. But maybe it didn't need such a lid being kept on it in those days, because the people were relatively prosperous. I mean, and of course, how the place has fallen. The history of Haiti is kind of interesting, because it was after the US, it was the first independent republic in the Western Hemisphere, the very first.
I know that.
Yeah, and 1804, something on that order, about then. And it was the gem of the French Empire at the time, because they produced huge amounts of sugar, which was, and rum, which is of huge value. So it was very prosperous. but it was 100% slaves with French overseers. And when they had a slave revolt, it was incredibly bloody. I mean, they killed all the Frenchmen. It was a nightmare. And then it was one dictatorship after another. So Papa Doc has a bad reputation because he was a voodoo priest, and he used that to psychologically dominate the people in addition to using the Tonton Macoute. But the place wasn't bad. Now it is just an unbelievable shithole, and it's dangerous. And usually when they say a country is dangerous, I poo-poo these things, but no, it is true about Haiti. That place is run by big gangs because crime is the main way that you rise to the top. The places. Anyway, I'm trying as we speak. I've got connections down in Haiti. I've been there half a dozen times over the last 50 years. And so I'm trying to meet with Michel Martelly, who's the previous president of Haiti, and is probably going to be the next president of Haiti after this chaos settles down, and pitch him on my plan. Won't go anywhere, but it'll be fun. Another great cocktail party story to tell. So a little, brief, precise on Haiti.
Well, I mean, so you say it's kind of the normal end or what you'd expect. The president being assassinated is kind of in a country like that. What are the? But it's a little shocking that these people come into the president's home, in the middle of the night, and then there's a little video of them, and there's like an American on a PA system saying it was there was a DEA, and
Oh, really?
yeah,
Oh,
that
I've
was
seen
video from a neighbor of the palace and it's definitely an American voice, and he's definitely saying that, but it doesn't mean that sort of was. It just gets people to stand down, around the palace, I guess.
Yeah, that can be a clever ploy to get whoever's guarding the place standing down, because of course, the place is essentially a colony of the US. I mean, they produce nothing in that country except Barbancourt rum, which I guess is very fine rums, incidentally. I guess they're still being made in Haiti, but I don't see how anything can be made in Haiti. It's just so chaotic. You can't get anything in, you can't get anything out. I mean, a friend of mine, very good friend of mine, has run a charity in Haiti for way too long. And I keep telling her, Susie, this place is a sinking ship. I mean, you're wasting your money and a lot of other people's money. Like, she shipped a container of food down there at one time. This was wonderful. And the container could not clear customs because of adequate bribes. Who the hell? There were so many things. So the container of food, where half the people on this island are starving, it rotted on the dot just because of the government. I mean, the enemy of this country is the government, which is nothing but a vehicle for theft, which is true of governments absolutely everywhere in the world. But it's really true of Haiti. And, my only question is, when are those 12 million or however many Haitians are on the island, when are they all going to say, make us your 52nd state after Washington, D.C., which I presume will be the 51st or 53rd after Puerto Rico? They'll probably be next on the runway.
Well, I mean, do they have, I guess, what I just don't understand why they would, what the political advantage would be, though, to include them in as a state, just because I saw this video from Biden just the other day. It was from probably 25 years ago, where he basically says, whether it goes, whether Haiti sinks 300 feet or rises in elevation 300 feet, it doesn't matter for American foreign policy. He was talking, this was during the, I think during the, I guess the time where we were, in the Balkans. So it was in the early 90s, but
that sounds somewhat similar to that comment that other congressman made when they were talking about Guam. And he asked, remember what he said? If everybody goes to one side of the island, will it tip over? Who am I talking about? Who is that moron?
It might be Louis Gohmert, maybe.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
so.
I couldn't figure out, and maybe nobody's figured out, was he just really high on drugs or is he really that stupid normally? I mean, it's one of the two only possibilities where he actually thought an island could tip over.
I don't know. It's possible. It's possible that either one of those, that he was on drugs or that he's just that
Or
stupid.
or both.
Yeah.
Both are possible.
What do you, why, I
But
wonder,
but
like,
why would well, because it would be a human rights thing. I mean, here's a desperately poor island. I mean, unbelievably poor. And I've been all over the island, incidentally, not just in Port-au-Prince, which is a shithole. There's no other way you can describe it. Uh, they'll say, "Hey, these are black people. You're going to be racist if you blah blah blah." And of course, the Democrats will want them because they'll vote for anybody that helps them out.
hmm. What do you think about? I'm surprised. I mean, because apparently the situation there is so much more desperate in many ways than it is in the DR right next door. And, from food shortages to everything else. I wonder when they look at,
Not even a basis of, not even a basis of comparison. 50 years ago, the DR is the epicenter of prostitution in I'd say the Western Hemisphere. It's their major import is good-looking women, and there were actually lots of hookers DR hookers that went to Haiti in those days. That's out of the question today. I mean, that's how places changed.
so what do you, but when do the people, if they get desperate enough, right across the border, there's this place that's got plenty of everything that they need. I mean, like there's all the resorts that they have there, all the, expat housing. And I mean, of course, I know that there's some poverty obviously in the Dominican Republic, but nowhere near Haitian levels. And I don't know what the differential in population is between those two, but you just got to wonder, with these violent gangs, they just decide, why don't we just go over to the neighborhood or the neighbor next to us and take what we need?
That's a good question. I think one reason is that the Dominicans will shoot them. I mean, if it looks like if it looks like they're crashing the border wholesale, the way the way it's probably happening or going to happen in the U.S. on the southern border at some point, entirely possible. I mean, what are you going to do? What are you going to do if you have a convoy or what do you know 10,000 people that all decide to come across the border together? How are you going to stop them? You're not
Yeah.
going to shoot them. So yeah, they just come across, and then they're your problem. Then you're, oh, I got to house them, I got to feed them, I got to send them to other parts of the country so they're not all sitting in concentration camps on the border. This is going to be a really interesting decade because this is going to happen everywhere.
What do you think about more assassinations of leaders around the world? Is that a bigger part of our future in the next decade, do you think?
Yes, I do, because the I did read a couple of articles that came out, just this morning that talked about what various world leaders were saying, and they were saying like, "Oh, this is a tragedy. This is horrible." It's like they're an old grandmother saying, "Isn't this horrible? Isn't this just a tragedy?" You know, these are all lies. Everybody knew, even these idiots. I mean, they had people tell the Moyes was a thief, a scoundrel, a horrible human being, and they're all deploring the fact that he's dead. Oh, well, I don't know how else you can get rid of somebody like that, quite frankly. They're talking about the democratic process has to be maintained. There is no democratic process there. These people are living in a dream world. That to think that you know if the next guy who's elected, Martelli, I think he will be because he's a rap star. Okay, it's like he's their Brad Pitt kind of. So of course they'll vote for him. He's rich, good looking, raps well. He's a rap star. Of course he talks well. So
This is why this president who was assassinated had like he had didn't he like he had basically taken emergency powers, so like there was no effective there was
yeah,
no effective.
the way it worked is that my understanding of this, and who knows what the facts are, but my understanding is that Martelli, who was the last president, uh, the rap star, that he appointed Moise to be kind of his stand-in, uh, in much the way that Putin appointed, who's that chap that,
Can't remember his name right now.
yeah, well, he's out of office. And he was just a stand-in anyway. So that was what was supposed to happen. But then Moise liked being president,
Yeah.
and he didn't want to step down after the 4-year term. Yeah, 4-year term was over. And then how are you going to get rid of him? You know, but
Well, but and then he apparently just appointed I thought he just like called for new elections or uh, appointed the prime minister very recently. So it's like it's almost like um, there was clearly political pressure on him, already. But he might, and then he I don't know. I guess his opponents didn't see a way out of it, so they ended up trying to take him out. But there was some, like, he was calling for new elections just yesterday, I believe. It was
yeah, yeah, I think so. It'll be very interesting to find out who it was that actually went in there and killed him, and exactly why they did it.
yeah.
That'll be fascinating if the facts ever come out. But the place is totally dominated by elements of the U.S. government, and insofar as there's any part that's not, it's dominated by the French government, because of course it used to be a French colony and they still speak French. They actually speak Creole, which is ununderstandable, but they all speak French if they have any education at all.
So you
So,
said you did think that this would like assassinations we'd see more of those of leaders in the future. And you mentioned that that people were like pearl clutching the leaders were like Bojo and stuff like that about this guy's death. And you think that, what is that, I guess, just to finish that thought, why do you think we'll see more of these assassinations in the future? I mean, the leaders were bothered by it because of course they don't want to be assassinated, but
yeah, of course. And it kind of takes the covering off of the sham called democracy. Where you vote for the most popular person that tells the most effective lies about giving you free shit. Um, because I think that the standard of living of the average person is going to collapse during this coming decade. The Greater Depression is actually, I've been predicting it for many years. It's been inevitable because of all the stupid things that government as an entity does. But I think we've actually come to its doorstep. And the dream world that we're living in, where through debt, we can cannibalize the capital that's saved by other people in the past, and we can mortgage our futures. Those are the two ways you live above your means. But then when you can't do those two things anymore, when the currency collapses, when taxes reach a certain point, then it all comes undone, okay? And when that happens, in a world where people think that the government can and should control the economy and control everything, and even Americans think that now. Everything is, what should we do? Which means, what should the state do? They're gonna get very unhappy, and with the people that are running the government. And you're gonna find crazy chimpanzees running out in the streets, killing people, including high government officials, which will be blamed. And then, of course, you'll get somebody who really raps good and says, I can fix it all, just give me enough power. And that's how you get into really bad situations. And that's going to happen. So I couldn't be more pessimistic. Haiti's kind of a template for what's going to happen in the future.
wow. Well, it's something to look forward to.
Yeah, look, it should be just free entertainment, where you get a report from Haiti every day to see what they've done. I'd like some boots on the ground to see which gang. Some of these gangs have hundreds of people, and they're very well armed. Mostly, it's financed by using Haiti as a drug depot. So things like heroin and cocaine come from other places, and then are shipped from Haiti to the US because there's no controls on what goes out of Haiti. I mean, so it's great. That's how. The other way, the money. The only reason that everybody doesn't starve to death there, because there's no property rights. Nobody knows who owns any of the land. I mean, the records are a total and complete shambles. If your family out in the country, outside of Port-au-Prince, has possession of an acre of ground and they can guard it from neighbors who aren't doing as well, or people that are refugees from Port-au-Prince, yeah, you can grow a plot and you can be a subsistence farmer. Okay, that can happen, but nobody's got any real title to anything in Haiti. It's actually just chaos. It's quite amazing, and voodoo actually really is still a presence. I think the last time or the time before I was there, I spent an afternoon with a Houngan, a voodoo priest, was a very elegant, civilized, well-educated, fun guy. And we sat around his place outside of Port-au-Prince. I don't know where it was. And we were just talking about, everything. And it was delightful. So, there's pockets in the place. I mean, been to a number of rich people's houses in Haiti, and you wouldn't know that there's this time bomb down there, mainly in Port-au-Prince, but everywhere, where these people could just be like, they could just boil over like a pot. But still, people that have money live a very elegant lifestyle in Haiti still.
Wow.
But there's no tourists anymore. Look, the only money that comes into Haiti is from overseas Haitians that ship money down there to their relatives and friends, so they don't have to grub for roots and berries, most of which have already been dug up. So you got that, and you got foreign aid. I mean, I don't know how much the U.S. government ships them. There was the latest thing that's in dispute there was $4 billion. Where did it come from? I forget, but it's gone, and nobody knows where it went. This is like magic. How do you make $4 billion disappear in a place that has no? I mean, it's just incredible. So anyway, I'm hoping to get to meet Martelli, who I think the past and I think probably future president in New York, which is where he's been living, and pitch him on my plan, because he's going to need a plan. He's dealing with a chaotic catastrophe, and he needs a plan. He doesn't have a plan. So, hey, it's a long shot, but 1 out of 100. But great subject for a cocktail conversation, or one of our conversations in the future. What happens? I hope you're in a position to come with me at a moment's notice if I get the word that yes, he'd like to see you.
I'd love to. Anytime. All right. Thanks, Doug. We'll wrap it up there, and we'll be back tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Okay. Super, Matt.